From MTN News, you're watching Montana This Morning.
The Bozeman City Commission discusses parking in downtown Bozeman. I'm Gabby Crevitt, and I'll have those details coming up.
Well, good morning, Southwest Montana. Chet Lehman, Matt Elwell with you here. Caitlin Corbett is off today.
She is. We're obviously as stumped by the math as anybody else.
We are.
We don't even talk about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, show us some other numbers that maybe we can.
These numbers I can get in touch with. Temperatures into the 50s, a couple of 60s. The afternoon highs just a touch cooler. We can handle that, and we could use a few numbers out of the rain bucket
for sure
as well. Right now, pretty quiet conditions. There may be a shower or a thunderstorm trying to form into the mid to late part of the afternoon. We are going to watch the potential of severe weather this afternoon. The biggest issues that we will have, small to moderate hail and gusty wind, but it does look like we have the potential of some decent showers across the area. Beautiful start to the day. We're getting sunrise photos coming in. They'll likely be dealing with afternoon showers and thunderstorms for us today. Temperatures are cooling down in the long term. We'll talk more about that, of course, in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you, Matt. 6:31 now. Here are the latest coronavirus numbers from the state health department. 63 people have now died from coronavirus. Bighorn County reporting 2 deaths on Sunday. There are more than 1,400 active cases, 71 people currently in the hospital, and more than 2,500 people have recovered from COVID-19. Gallatin County has 67 active cases. Silverbow County, 33 active cases. Well, the schools across Montana try to figure out how to start back up this fall. We have some questions, but for teachers who are trying to stay safe and do their jobs, there's even more pressure. MTN's Andy Curtis explains.
Teachers, bus drivers, and administrators across Montana and the country all want to get back to work safely. But returning to traditional classroom settings during a pandemic is a complicated subject, because it's not just the students teachers will have to worry about this year.
Our most at-risk members cannot go into a brick and mortar building if their doctor tells them not to. And if they're caring for a parent or a child or a family member who's at risk, the level of precaution that they have to take going to work and going between work and home is a really high concern for folks who maybe are healthy themselves but have to consider the health of a household member.
Weighing financial responsibilities and health concerns will require some flexibility from educators, and the Montana Federation of Public Employees is currently surveying their members to see what they expect this school year. And according to Curtis, options for teachers who can't return to in-person classrooms because of health concerns will be based on each individual, and that is not an easy decision.
There's a lot of anxiety right now in the education community, and I mean everywhere. We're all surviving this pandemic together. We're going to get through it. Montana's tough, and MFPE members are some of the toughest.
They will have to be, with an uncertain school year ahead of us. Reporting from Helena, Andy Curtis, MTN News.
Now, even as the U.S. hit a single-day record of new coronavirus cases this month, the Centers for Disease Control's latest statement calls for schools to reopen. But critics say there is a vague guidance for what happens if there is a school outbreak. Asher Karashi has more on what parents need to know as they think about kids trying to go safely back to school.
As states across the country weigh the risks of reopening schools this fall, the message from the White House has been loud and clear.
Yeah, I would like to see the schools open 100%.
Most doctors, educators, and psychologists agree that going back to school would be in the best interest of students. But what happens if just one student contracts the coronavirus? Would that force a shutdown? The CDC says no.
Getting people to understand that the knee-jerk answer is not there's a single case in a school, that then equals closing back down the school.
Once you start getting into dozens or even more kids and teachers starting to get infected, it's going to be very hard to keep that school open.
Dr. Ashish Jha is a professor of medicine and the director of Harvard University's Global Health Institute.
We have to have really smart planning, and we have to have a clear protocol for how to identify kids and teachers and staff who get infected, and then what to do when we identify them. And I just haven't seen that kind of clear protocol yet.
Late last week, the CDC did issue new guidelines for school reopenings. They include encouraging social distancing, spacing out desks, and requiring face coverings. But the guidance leaves it up to states, schools, and local health departments as to how to precisely handle an actual outbreak.
What we have is patchworks not just across states, but even within states, across communities. States are turning over the responsibility to individual communities and saying, you figure it out.
Recommended strategies from the CDC's guidelines include immediately separating staff and children with COVID-19 symptoms, setting up safe transport for anyone who is sick to their home or to a healthcare facility, closing off areas used by a sick person, cleaning and disinfecting after 24 hours when possible, and immediately notifying health officials, staff, families, and anyone who may have had close contact with the infected person while maintaining confidentiality laws. Still, there is concern. A recent survey found 46% of Americans believe schools need major modifications to deal with the coronavirus pandemic, and another 31% think they shouldn't reopen for in-person learning at all.
We can open schools safely, but key to that is making sure the level of community transmission is pretty low, so you don't have sort of raging wildfires in the community, because it's going to be very hard to keep those fires out of the school.
I'm Usher Qureshi reporting.
Almost 6:36 now. The Bozeman City Commission meets tonight to talk about a possible solution for downtown parking. The problem is that parked cars spill into nearby neighborhoods as the city continues to grow. MTN's Gabby Crevitt has the details on what that plan might actually look like.
Parking in downtown Bozeman can be a headache for those who work on Main Street and for those who live just blocks away. On Monday night, the Bozeman City Commission will discuss a possible solution that hopes to ensure a parking spot for both residents and those who work on Main Street. Parking is limited for employees who work a full shift in downtown Bozeman, so many opt to park a few blocks away in a nearby residential neighborhood.
If I do have to find a spot, I park 3 or 4 blocks down Wilson, and then it takes me like 5 or 6 minutes to walk into work. But that's where I find the best parking. It's pretty much impossible to find parking like anywhere else.
Earlier this year, the Bozeman City Commission approved a parking management district.
If there comes a day when there are a lot of people trying to park in the neighborhoods, because right now it's free and unlimited time in those neighborhoods, if neighbors are seeing trouble in front of their house or around the block, that we could consider creating a zone, which comes a smaller part of that district, so that they're not overrun with cars.
In the last meeting about parking, there was pushback from residents in the neighborhoods who didn't like the idea of having to buy a parking pass. But the commission said those zones would only be created if residents felt like there was a problem. And once zones were established, employees that work in downtown Bozeman could also buy leftover passes in hopes of easing the congestion. Mayor Mell says this time for the second reading, there are some improvements he thinks the public will appreciate.
We made changes to make it clear how robust public involvement could be, the right to protest it in your neighborhood, things like that. So the citizen engagement opportunities have gone up.
In Bozeman, Gabby Crevitt, MTN News.
6:38 now. Members of the Montana National Guard working to improve their skills when it comes to water rescues. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian shows us why this training is so valuable.
On Wednesday morning, Montana National Guard aviation crews were out at Canyon Ferry Lake, practicing to be ready for water rescues. Helicopter crews conducted a series of simulated rescues. They practiced lowering rescue swimmers to the water. The swimmers then swam over to a person in need of assistance, attached them to a rope, and let the crew hoist them back to the helicopter. The Gallatin County dive team helped place people in the water as simulated patients. Leaders say the experience they get here is invaluable.
We are a landlocked state, so you don't get a whole lot of that water experience. So they come out of it with a lot more confidence in the water.
The National Guard brought in outside instructors to conduct this training. The goal is to introduce all crews to the same standard procedure for handling this type of rescue.
It's basically a crawl, walk, run. We're starting here with integrating the rescue swimmers, getting to the water, getting to survivor, and extracting that survivor back to the aircraft. In a benign setting, there's not much current here.
Water rescues bring additional challenges for the helicopter crews.
When you're out in the middle of a lake, just trying to hover becomes a little bit harder because you don't have a reference point, a fixed point on land, for example.
Leaders said this type of training will help Guard members in a range of situations, from rescues in Montana to assisting in other states during disasters.
It's extremely important. Our job is so that others may live, and if we can't come and do it professionally, do it accurately, do it right, we don't want to add that potential hazard.
These crews' training will continue later in the week as they move on to practicing rescues in moving water. At Canyon Ferry Lake, I'm Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
Jonathan tells us last Wednesday's operation was part of a week-long training program building up to more difficult scenarios, including swift water rescues. Very good stuff. Love to see that training. Let's take a quick break here on Montana This Morning. When we come back, people looking for exercise and entertainment during the pandemic, turning in droves to bicycling and increasingly kayaking. Coming up, finding out why you may have a hard time climbing into that new trend anytime soon. Also, let's check in with our friends in New York to see what's coming up. It's 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, we're in Florida to see how the tropical storm is complicating efforts to contain the coronavirus. Also, as COVID cases continue to surge, hundreds of districts planning to reopen schools have reportedly reversed course. Hear how superintendents across the country plan to restart learning. Plus, the majority of workers don't feel safe going back to the office. That's according to LinkedIn. We'll talk to the company's editor-at-large about how to make your workplace safe and comfortable. And meet a man who was afraid to walk alone in his community because of the color of his skin. How a moment turned into a movement. We'll see you at 7.